Hey, it's Mr. Lineski here with another Top 5 and Under 5 review video for our Triangle Congruency Unit, Unit 5. This is where I go over the top 5 things you need to know for the Unit 5 test in under 5 minutes. So let's get started. Number 1, you need to know that all angles of a triangle always add up to equal 180 degrees. So for a quick example here, if I had something like 3x, x plus 15 and 85, and these were all the degrees of the angles. How would I solve for x? I would solve for x by simply adding these things together and then setting them equal to 180 degrees. So we would combine like terms, giving us 4x plus 100 equals 180, giving us 4x equals 80. Therefore, x is equal to 20. So all triangles, no matter what type, always add up to 180. You need to know your classifications, number 2, of all of the different triangles. So triangles are classified, sort of get like a first and last name. We have angles and classifying by sides. Classifying by angles, obtuse means that it has one obtuse angle. Acute means that all 3 angles are acute. Right means that you have one right angle in the triangle, and equiangular, if you remember, that means that all of the angles are equal to 60 degrees. They're all the same. All 3 of them are 60. Sides, scalene means that none of the sides are congruent. Isosceles means that at least 2 of the sides are congruent. And equilateral means that all 3 sides are congruent. Please remember that these 2 words here always go hand in hand. If a triangle is equilateral, you have to assume that it is also equiangular. Number 3, all of our triangle congruencies. So throughout the chapter, we looked at 5 different ways to prove triangles congruent. First way we looked at was side, side, side. So in this figure here, we have a shared side. So that would be side, side, side. Over in our example for side angle side, we have vertical angles that we could mark congruent. So remember, we're always looking to add stuff to the figures, so that would give us side angle side. Hypotenuse leg only works in right triangles, and if you think about the breakdown of the name, what you need the hypotenuse and you need a leg. So you also need the right angles marked. So the right angles are marked. We have a leg. So we need the hypotenuse, and that's our shared side right there. For angle side angle, all I'm given here is that the sides are parallel. So first off, I can at least say that I know I'm going to have the shared side. Hopefully you're comfortable with that by now. So I have the shared side, so now using the parallel lines and the transversal, if these 2 lines are parallel, that means that this angle is congruent to this angle. And then you could also look at this side parallel to this side, and I'm still looking at my transversal here. So these 2 angles would be congruent, and that's sort of where, let me get rid of all that nonsense. So basically I knew that this is congruent to this, and that's congruent to that. And that's where we get our angle side angle. And then the next problem, very, very similar. So we're given that this angle here is congruent. We have parallel lines. So remember, if only these 2 lines are parallel, you can only say that these 2 angles are congruent. And again, we have our shared side. So this is where we get angle, angle, side. Proof helpers. So throughout the problems here, we saw a lot of proofs and proving triangles congruency. We have shared sides and angles, reflexive. So anytime in a proof you're using the shared sides reflexive, that's when the 2 triangles are pushed up together. Vertical angles are anytime you have the x figure, you can mark vertical angles there. And if you see the parallel line marks, you basically want to look for either alternate interior angles or corresponding angles. Also, I want to remind you that if at any point you're proving lines parallel or you're proving angles parallel instead of the triangles, you're going to end up using CP, CTC in order to do that. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. And finally, we have Triangle properties for isosceles and equilateral triangles. The first one says if two legs are congruent, then the base angles are congruent. So if I gave you a triangle that looked like this and I told you that those two sides were congruent, you can assume that the base angles are congruent. Consequently, I also have that if the base angles are congruent, then the legs are congruent. So if I look at that, if I marked that these two base angles are congruent, we can assume that those two sides are congruent. And finally, if all the angles are equal, then all of the sides are equal. So if you have a figure that looks like this, we can assume that all three sides are equal. Also remember that if all the angles are marked equal, they all have to equal 60 degrees. So those are your 5 things you need to know for Unit 5. Thank you for watching.